In line with the consumer-focused objectives of the Nigerian Communications Commission and the Central Bank of Nigeria, the two regulators have drawn up a framework to address consumer complaints arising from unsuccessful airtime and data transactions during network downtime, system glitches, or human input errors. The framework is the outcome of several months of engagements involving the NCC, the CBN, mobile network operators, value-added service providers, deposit money banks, and other relevant stakeholders. These engagements were prompted by rising cases of failed airtime and data purchases, where subscribers were debited without receiving value and experienced delays in resolutions. This is all we shall be looking at tonight on Nigeria Today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ikaria Clinton. Now with me in the studio for this conversation is Haniel Jafaro. He's an IT and cybersecurity expert. It's a pleasure to have you in Nigeria Today. It's a pleasure to have you also. Happy New Year to you. So, Haniel, before we go into other issues, first of all, I just want to get what's your perception about this new framework that they are trying to, start implementing refund policy for failed airtime and data purchases. What do you think about it?
It's a laudable initiative. It's not something anyone that doesn't want or that is against such. Probably the person is not in tune with what's happening. I think a whole lot of persons have lost their funds as a result of as a result of needing a particular service from some of these telcos and not getting value for money, even though they will be debited at the end of the day. In fact, personally, I've had to experience such, and a whole lot of persons. The challenge with this issue is that many persons usually don't see the need of passing through the stress of going to bank to make complaint for 8,000 naira, because the cost of taking them to bank and the time they will have to wait in the queue and all those processes, it's way more than the 8,000 naira. That's one perspective. Then there's the other perspective of those who are elderly, who don't even know that there is the process of you going to the bank or going to whatever place to make to submit an inquiry for refund. So these two categories of persons, you realize that funds have gone out and value was not received as a result of probably technical issue or whatsoever, which is largely technical. But having a framework like this tends to put us in the position of wanting to solve the problem, and first identifying that, agreeing that there's a problem, now wanting to solve the problem, which is something laudable, is something good, and it's something I think that they should take to the latter.
Okay, having said that, Haniel, you also said you've experienced it where you make a kind of transaction, maybe online or something, and eventually you were debited and you didn't get the value for your money. So what actually happens, from a technical point of view, what really happens at the background when you make a purchase, maybe airtime or data, you're debited, or you don't get to see your airtime?
Okay, so there are different angles to it, but I think the most prominent angle to this particular challenge of airtime is not only just airtime. There's also the issue of utility bills, where you have to make payment for your utility, getting units for your power, and not getting the token that is needed. So it's not just airtime per se, but yeah, we're solving the airtime one tends to be, it's going broad. So now the challenge is that, one of the challenges of that particular problem is that the way the system works is that a bank, for example, they have a phone number that they have loaded millions into. That's the way it works. So they've loaded millions into a particular phone number. So when you make request for data, or you make request for airtime, one of the things it does is that it uses that phone number to make that request and do the transfer. So there is the possibility that there is the unit that is used, or the phone number or the number that is used to make that request, there is no more money in that number. So as at the time you're making that request, probably there's no money in the number. So, but your money has been debited because it is after successful debit that transaction would now go to processing. But now it has been debited, but there is no fund in that number that is supposed to initiate the process of ensuring that you get your funds. So that's usually one of the major issues. Then there's the other issue of downtime. This thing works with network. You're making requests at times via your bank app, at times via USSD. Most of the issues largely come when you're making the request via USSD. Now, once you make that request via USSD, between the server you're communicating with and the other end that is supposed to respond to your request, there may be downtime of internet infrastructure, there may be downtime of internet which can prevent your request from being processed. There's also the possibility that the infrastructure is in its peak. So a whole lot of requests are coming to the infrastructure at the same time. So it may not have the capacity to be able to withstand all the requests coming all at the same time. So some may have to drop in the course of it, but your funds would have been debited from your account. So there are a lot of factors that can cause that technical glitch to happen. But having a framework like this tends to, it invariably means that they would have dot all the I's and cross all the T's to ensure that whatsoever is the issue that is preventing value from being dispensed is addressed, and if possible, refund is done almost immediately. Okay,
from what you just said now, which means if one is to be held responsible in terms of initiating the refund, it should be the bank. Let me get it clear. Is it the bank, the telecom providers, or who exactly?
Okay, so in most cases, when you're debited and you don't get value for money, it is the bank, because the bank is the one that is in custody of your funds. So they're supposed to be the one to process that transaction. There are challenges. The bank themselves may have the challenge of not being able to get the necessary service from the telcos. So, but you deal directly, even though you want the service from the telcos, you deal directly with the bank. The bank help you to interact with the telcos. The telcos process the transaction, and sends your airtime to the bank that now sends it to you. So it's not as though that the telcos sends it directly. So the bank still has a role to play. But in the case whereby that transaction doesn't get to you, there is still, because most softwares are designed with non-repudiation, which is a way of ensuring that for every transaction that happens, there is a feedback where you can track where the transaction went wrong. So you'll be able to track and know whether the transaction was successful, whether the airtime was delivered or not. And if it is not, you should get a refund. That's if you know how to go that route.
Okay, now, it has been said that a central monitoring dashboard, that will track failed transactions. Now, from your point of view, do you think this will be realistic?
Yes, I believe so. I believe yes, it's all about you having the will, and since the will is already there for them to be able to bring in all the necessary stakeholders together, they've sat down. It's not just the bank, the telcos, and all necessary stakeholders. They sat down to come up with this framework. So I believe they are all in one accord to ensure that they provide value for money. So yeah, the dashboard is not just able to check for failed transaction. It's also able to track transactions generally, so it would know at what point the transaction is finished. Because there's also the issue of dispute resolution, where the bank will say the challenge is not from us, it's from the telcos. The telcos will say the challenge is not from us, it's from the bank. So there is that issue, because there is the need for interoperability between the bank infrastructure and the telcos and the telecoms infrastructure. So if that happens with the dashboard now, it's easier for us to know who's actually who should be held responsible for every transaction. Is it the bank, is it the telcos, or whatsoever stakeholder that is involved in that process? So yes, the dashboard implementing the dashboard is possible and is realistic, and is something I believe that can be done.
Now, what would you advocate in the areas of stronger protection and fraud insurance?
Now, when we're talking about interoperability, there is a system, the agency that manages the banks, which is the CBN, the supervisory agency or the regulatory agency of financial institutions, CBN, and for telcos, the supervisory agency is the NCC. So now we are seeing how the NCC and telcos having to integrate their infrastructure with the bank in whatsoever case they deem necessary, just for the purpose of ensuring that this vision is achieved, or the objective of this framework is achieved. So it means that they would have to see how best they can bring their security teams, not fiscal purposes, but their information security teams, to see how best they can protect this infrastructure, because with this now, it's now another landscape, threat landscape for attackers. So there will be need for protecting those infrastructure, especially infrastructure that tends to hold the interoperability between the two industries, because we are seeing a synergy between the communication industry and the financial industry, which has always been, but now we are seeing something more direct and more robust.
Now, there's actually this, this concern that I really want to. I know this is really not that much new, because there are some times when you initiate a transaction, it doesn't go immediately, you get a refund. Okay, but some other times too, you initiate, you are debited, you don't get a refund, you don't get to see the airtime, you don't even see the data. So why does it really, take? Sometimes people get refunds. Sometimes why is that a problem, really? And is it possible to make it maybe a little bit seamless than what it is, with this framework?
Okay. Yes. To start with, to answer the first question, I'm not holding brief for the bank, but I believe one of the reasons why you get immediate refund for some transactions is because the transaction can be verified as failed from the bank's end. Okay. So if the transaction can be verified as failed from the bank's end, then it's easier for the bank to take that decision and say, you know what, this transaction has failed from our end, so let's do a refund automatically. But there are times where the transaction has been initiated from the bank's end and it has been transferred to the telecom's end, and it failed in the course of transfer. So there will now be need for the bank to verify with the telecoms if the transaction actually succeeded at their end before a refund will be initiated. But if now that verification takes time, so it's not something that they do immediately. But now with this dashboard, it's easier to know where the transaction fails. It's easier to know who's responsible. Is it the bank? Is it the financial institution, or is it the telecoms? And it's easier for refunds to be initiated almost immediately, because from the dashboard you know that value has not been dispensed, and since value has not been dispensed, it's easier to just initiate a refund.
Thank you very much, Adil. We'll take a breather here. The conversation will continue shortly. Don't go away.
The implementation of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow, under digital economy, for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different? We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that are questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few days to come, you see that we are all around their own crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Welcome back. This is your Nigeria Today, and we're looking at a refund policy for failed airtime and data purchases. And of course, I have an expert here in the studio that is doing justice to the many questions we are putting forward. Now, there's also these really, really disturbing, situation. How can one identify, fake people who send codes for free airtime and data? I'm asking as a cybersecurity expert that you are.
Okay, so when you receive free airtime and data, the first thing you want to know is to check where the airtime is coming from. There is a possibility that the airtime will be coming from a number. So in most cases, if you're buying an airtime from your bank, you don't receive it from, even though it's a number that processes it. That's a back-end interaction, but you don't receive it from a number. You receive it from the telecoms, like your regular top-up. They say you see it MTN, Airtel, and all of that. So when you're receiving a code from a number and it's not this share, there's this package where you can share credit or share data with someone or gift data with someone. If it's not from a number that is known, then there is that possibility that it is wrong. Also, you should also take note of when you begin to receive codes. When you begin to receive codes that you should be careful. Anything that has to do with code, especially when it is OTP and all this, because they are access they are access credentials for something that you own. So an attacker may be trying to see how they can extract that code from you, or they want you to impute that code in a system to give them access to something. So it's just red flag when you're receiving an SMS that has to do with code from a system or a number from a system you did not initiate. The first is that you have to ensure that you've initiated it. You are the one that initiated. You initiated that transaction. If you did not initiate, please try as much as possible to disregard that code. Because if you don't, you may end up putting your account in the wrong hands. Okay, now earlier you talked about it, this dashboard. Of course, that's part of the the framework. Now, is it possible for a failed airtime or data transaction to be lost permanently in the system? No, I don't think so. Okay. And the reason is because once a transaction is initiated, you are debited, and that debit is a proof that a transaction has been initiated. Once the transaction succeeds, there is a feedback that gets back to the bank system to let them know that this transaction has been carried out successfully. Okay. So if the transaction is initiated and there is no feedback, it means that something happened in the course of it. So the bank would need to verify what happened in the course of processing that transaction. So except you're saying that there was the transaction was never initiated. But if the transaction was initiated, it would be in your records. So is it possible to be deleted? Okay, so maybe from the back end by someone else. Okay, so that becomes a challenge. It is possible. However, it is not from the regulatory angle. I think they have a number of years they are expected to keep certain transactions. So it's not expected that they should delete it immediately the transaction happens. So even if it's a failed transaction, it should be there as a failed transaction, because it will make your account not to balance. Looking at it from an accounting perspective, so looking at it from an accounting perspective, it makes your account not to balance, because you have for every credit there should be a corresponding debit. So if there is an account that tends to you've been debited for a transaction and you did not receive value, now then that particular transaction where you were debited was deleted, then you now get a refund. So it means that one leg of the transaction is hanging, the other leg is you get. So that becomes an issue looking at it from the financial perspective and accounting perspective. It ensures that your account won't balance. That's not, your account won't be balanced, and it affects the bank reconciliation when that time comes, when you're doing your bank account statement of account and all of that. So deleting transactions now, deleting transaction is almost it's possible, but not something that the regulatory agencies approve, because there is a time frame to which transaction history should be deleted.
Now, how can consumers or customers protect themselves from repeated losses, due to failed transactions and all of that?
Okay, to start with, it's easier. Most banks, one of the things I noticed that most banks have been doing is that they've initiated a dispute system from their mobile application. So, and that means you can actually initiate a dispute transaction. You can initiate a failed transaction dispute from your mobile application, and you don't have to visit the bank. So that makes it easier for you to be able to get a refund without passing through the stress of going to bank and joining the queue and all of that. But beyond that, I think consumers need to be careful, especially when they're using USSD, because most of these cases, the cases of failed transaction, it's usually particular to USSD. That doesn't mean that airtime doesn't do that. But I mean, that doesn't mean mobile banking application doesn't do that. But it happens in mobile banking application when, in the course of you trying to process or submit that transaction for processing, there's a bridge in your network. You have network issue and all of that. It's even easier for that to be initiated because the bank would know. It's easier because the bank would know where the transaction has not even been initiated from their end. So usually I would recommend that consumers use mobile banking application as against USSD for disputes to initiate their transaction, because so that it's easier for them to log a dispute in case if there is a failed transaction.
Sometimes it's not like you don't want to use the banking app. Sometimes probably because of network or something, you see yourself you just be hanging, and the fastest way for you to load, and you need this data as fast as possible, or the airtime as fast as possible. So you see yourself using I'm talking from my own personal experience.
Yeah. So speed. Okay, now, so when you want to prioritize speed, you would use USSD. But if you want to prioritize security, safety, quality, and ease for refund, I think you should use the mobile banking application. That's just my recommendation, my suggestion, based on what I know and how I know that the system works.
Okay. In your view, what must change, to make the refund system more transparent and customer friendly?
Okay, so it's easier. One of the things I think can change is if from the bank app you can actually ascertain if a transaction failed or not, or fails or not. So if a transaction succeeds, you should be able to see it almost immediately. There are some bank applications that once you submit a request, it is considered submitted until it has been verified successful. That is when you would the status of the transaction can change from submitted to successful. Some banks they hold you while they are submitting the transaction until they process it before they will not tell you whether it succeeds or not. But meanwhile, while they are holding you, the time is going, because network can fail, a whole lot of things can happen within that period. So it's better that they get the request, make the request status to be submitted, then process the request at the back end. At that point, they can easily process. If it fails, they reprocess again. If it fails, they reprocess again. Then until it succeeds, before they will now change the status to successful. I think with that, it's easier for you to know, okay, this request is submitted. It has not given me a status feedback. So I think we should begin to, there are some USSD code that you would use, and it tells you processing requests, but meanwhile, you would wait till the next day, you won't receive anything, because it's really did not process anything. Okay, and there are some banks that you would not even have account, you not have. There was a time that there's a particular bank, there was no money in my account. I didn't know that there was no money. I just tried to load it, and I got credited.
Be sure that they will collect the
I know, but that's a failed system from their end.
Okay.
Just imagine if it's someone that is criminal in nature. There are things that can happen with that kind of processing.
Thank you very much, Hania Jafaru, IT and cybersecurity expert. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And thank you for being part of the program. Don't forget, Nigeria Today is every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. I am Eukaria Clinton. Do have a wonderful weekend.